I'm pregnant with your child, Adrian. Those words shattered in the dark office like thunder. Elena Cross stood before the only man she'd ever loved, the man who'd just announced his wedding to another woman in 2 weeks. 6 years as assistant to the feared shipping mogul and underworld ruler of Manhattan, and one unforgettable night had changed everything. Now, with storms raging outside and lightning splitting the sky, Elena faced the hardest choice of her life: keep her baby in this world of violence or disappear forever. If you want to see how this story of love, betrayal, and redemption unfolds, stay with me until the end. Don't forget to like and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The storm hit Manhattan like a fist. Rain hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrian Vale's penthouse office on the 63rd floor, each drop a tiny explosion against the glass. Lightning fractured the sky over the East River, illuminating the city in brief, violent bursts. Elena Cross stood at those windows, one hand pressed flat against the cold surface, watching the water streak down in patterns that looked almost like tears. Behind her, Adrian's voice cut through the thunder. "You're not listening." She wasn't. She'd stopped listening the moment he'd said the word wedding. Elena turned slowly, her reflection ghosting across the dark glass. At 28, she'd spent 6 years perfecting the art of composure. 6 years as Adrian Vale's executive assistant, the woman who anticipated his needs before he voiced them, who moved through his world of shipping contracts and backroom deals with the efficiency of a machine. 6 years of professionalism so tight it could strangle. But tonight, that composure was cracking. Adrian sat behind his desk, a fortress of black walnut and steel that cost more than most people earned in a year. He looked tired. The observation struck her with unexpected force. Adrian Vale never looked tired. At 35, he carried himself with the controlled violence of a man who'd clawed his way from the Brooklyn docks to the top of an empire that straddled the line between legitimate business and something far darker. The Constantine family, he was saying, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Sophia Constantine specifically. The agreement was finalized this afternoon. Agreement. He called it an agreement, like it was another shipping contract, another merger, another calculated move on the chessboard he played with human lives. When? Elena heard herself ask. Her voice sounded strange, distant. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. She'd known this was coming. Of course she'd known. For months, the whispers had circulated through the network of families that controlled New York's underworld. Adrian Vale needed an alliance. The Ukrainians were pushing into his territory from Brighton Beach. The Chinese syndicates were making moves in Red Hook. And the Constantine family, with their connections to Eastern European shipping lanes and their reputation for ruthless efficiency, offered the kind of partnership that could tip the balance. All it cost was a wedding. Elena had prepared herself for this news. She'd rehearsed her reaction 100 times in her mind. She would nod. She would make the appropriate arrangements. She would continue being exactly what she'd always been. Indispensable, invisible, utterly professional. But that was before 3 weeks ago. Before the charity gala at the plaza, where someone had spiked the champagne with something stronger, and the normal rules had dissolved like sugar in rain. Before Adrian had found her on the rooftop garden. Before he'd looked at her like she was something other than an employee. Before his mouth had found hers with a desperation that felt like drowning. Before they'd ended up in his private suite. Before clothes had hit the floor. Before he'd touched her like he was memorizing her. Before he'd said her name like it meant something. Before she'd woken up alone with nothing but a note that said, "This can't happen again." And it hadn't. For 3 weeks, they'd maintained the fiction. Adrian had been coldly professional. Elena had matched him, degree for degree. Neither of them had acknowledged that anything had changed, except everything had changed. Because 2 days ago, Elena had stared at a plastic stick in a pharmacy bathroom and watched 2 pink lines appear like a sentence being handed down. Elena. She blinked. Adrian was standing now, moving around the desk with that predatory grace that made people instinctively step back. He didn't touch her. He never touched her. Not in the office, not in public, not since that night. "I need you focused," he said. "The next 2 weeks are critical. The Constantines will be sending representatives tomorrow to begin the integration process. Sophia arrives Friday. I need you to coordinate with, I'm pregnant." The words fell between them like stones into deep water. Adrian went completely still. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the silence stretched so thin it could snap. His face was unreadable. Adrian Vale's face was always unreadable. It was one of the first things she'd learned about him. In business meetings, during violent confrontations, in moments of triumph or disaster, his expression remained locked behind a mask of cool control. But his eyes. Elena had learned to read his eyes. Right now they were black with something she couldn't name. "Say that again," he said quietly. "I'm pregnant." Her voice was steadier now. 3 weeks. I took 4 tests. They're all positive. 3 weeks. He repeated it like he was testing the weight of the words. The gala. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded anyway. Adrian moved to the windows, his back to her. His shoulders were rigid beneath the charcoal suit he wore like armor. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Options. The clinical coldness of the word made something twist in Elena's chest. She'd expected this. Of course she'd expected this. Adrian Vale didn't do complications. He solved problems, eliminated obstacles. This was just another variable to be managed. "I'm keeping it," she said. He turned. "That's not what I—" "Yes, it is." She met his gaze straight on. "That's exactly what you meant. But I'm telling you now, that's not an option. Not for me." Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe. Or respect. Or something else entirely. "You understand what that means," Adrian said. Not a question. A statement. Elena understood perfectly. She understood that Adrian Vale's child would be a target from the moment it drew breath. She understood that the world he inhabited was one of constant violence, where blood ties were leverage and children were bargaining chips. She understood that bringing a baby into his empire was like handing a loaded gun to his enemies. "I understand," she said. "Then you understand why this is impossible." "I understand why you think it's impossible." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Don't be naive, Elena. You know what I am. You know what I do. Every enemy I've ever made would see a child as an opportunity. Every rival family would—" He stopped, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "I can't protect you. Not like this. Not with everything else happening. I'm not asking you to." That stopped him. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Elena took a breath. She'd been planning this moment since she'd seen those pink lines. Planning what to say, how to say it, how to make him understand without revealing too much. Without showing him that her hands shook every time he walked into a room. Without admitting that 3 weeks ago had been the culmination of 6 years of wanting something she could never have. "I'm resigning," she said. "Effective immediately. I'll stay long enough to train my replacement, help with the transition. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Then I'm leaving New York." "Leaving?" Adrian's voice was flat. "I have a job offer in London. Financial consulting. It's been pending for months. I was going to turn it down, but now—" She shrugged, the lie flowing smoothly. "It makes sense. Fresh start, different life." "You're running." "I'm being practical." Elena forced herself to hold his gaze. "You're getting married. You're forming an alliance that could determine the future of your entire operation. You don't need this complication, and I don't need to raise a child in a war zone. So you just disappear." His voice was getting quieter, which was more dangerous than if he'd shouted. "Take my child across the ocean, and what? Pretend I don't exist?" "You're the one who wrote, 'This can't happen again.'" The words came out sharper than she intended. "You're the one getting married in 2 weeks to secure a business deal. What exactly did you think was going to happen, Adrian? Did you think I'd just stay here watching you build a life with someone else while I—" She cut herself off. Too much. She was revealing too much. But Adrian was moving toward her now, closing the distance between them with 3 long strides. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne, that expensive scent of cedar and something darker, something that reminded her of that night at the plaza. "While you what?" he demanded. Elena's heart was hammering. "While I raise your child in the margins of your empire. While I watch other people hold what should be yours. While I—" She stopped again, forcing the emotion down. "This isn't about me. It's about what's best for the baby." "What's best?" Adrian's laugh was bitter. "You think running is what's best? You think depriving my child of a father is what's best?" "Your child will have a father," Elena said coldly. Just not you." The words hung between them like a slap. Adrian's expression went completely blank. When he spoke, his voice could have frozen steel. "You would do that. You would lie to my child. Tell them I didn't want them. Tell them I abandoned them. I would tell them the truth." Elena's throat was tight, that their father had responsibilities he couldn't walk away from, that he made the choice he had to make, that sometimes love isn't enough. Love. Adrian caught the word like it was something dangerous. "Is that what you think this is?" The question cut deeper than any blade. Elena felt something inside her chest crack open. "No," she said quietly. "I think this is a mistake. One night when we both had too much champagne and not enough sense. One night that never should have happened. Elena, I think you're a man who's built an empire on control. And this is the one thing you can't control. I think you're getting married for power. And I think a baby doesn't fit into those plans. And I think..." She had to stop, had to breathe. "I think I need to leave before I say something we'll both regret." She turned toward the door. Adrian's voice stopped her. "If you walk out of here, if you take my child and disappear, I will find you." Elena looked back. Adrian was standing in the center of his office, backlit by the storm, and he looked like every dangerous thing people whispered about him. "You'll try," she said, "but I'm better at disappearing than you think." She walked out before he could respond, before the tears could start, before the mask could crack completely. Yeah. Elena's apartment was a 40-minute subway ride from Adrian's office, a modest one-bedroom in Park Slope that cost half her salary. She'd always been careful with money, always saved, always prepared for the possibility that working for Adrian Vale might end badly. She just hadn't expected it to end like this. The rain had followed her home. Elena stood in her tiny kitchen, making tea she wouldn't drink, watching the water stream down her window. Her phone buzzed, once, twice, 7 times in quick succession, all from Adrian. She didn't look at the messages, didn't need to. She could imagine what they said. Demands, threats, maybe promises. Adrian Vale was used to getting what he wanted, used to people bending to his will. But Elena Cross had spent 6 years learning to stand firm against the force of him. 6 years watching him manipulate, negotiate, intimidate. 6 years studying the man behind the mask. She knew his tells, knew when he was bluffing, knew the difference between his public face and his private thoughts. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that Adrian Vale would never let her go. Not willingly, which was why she had to run. The plan had been forming in her mind for 2 days since those pink lines had appeared. London was a lie. Financial consulting was a lie. Every word she'd said in that office had been a carefully constructed misdirection. Because Elena didn't just work for Adrian Vale, she worked with information, contracts, financial records. The kind of documentation that painted a very clear picture of how Adrian's legitimate shipping business intersected with his less legitimate operations. She'd never intended to use that information, never wanted to betray him, but she also never intended to let her child become collateral damage in someone else's war. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. Elena's hand hovered over the screen. Adrian's name glowed in the darkness. She should answer, should at least hear what he had to say. Instead, she powered the phone off completely. Tomorrow, she would liquidate everything. The savings account she'd built over 6 years, the investment portfolio she'd carefully curated, the emergency fund that most people never thought they'd need. Tomorrow, she would become someone else. But tonight, Elena allowed herself one moment of weakness. One moment to remember how Adrian had looked at her at the plaza, like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows. One moment to remember the way his hands had felt, the way he'd whispered her name, the way she'd let herself believe, for just a few hours, that maybe love could be enough. Then she locked that memory away with all the others and started packing. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in deception. Elena trained her replacement, an efficient woman named Rebecca who asked the right questions and took detailed notes. She coordinated the arrival of the Constantine family representatives, scheduling meetings and arranging accommodations with the same precision she'd always shown. She acted like nothing had changed, and every night she dismantled her life piece by piece. Bank accounts closed, forwarded to an account in the Cayman Islands, then split between 3 different offshore holdings. Documentation altered, Medical records requested and then scrubbed. Apartment lease broken. Possessions sorted into 3 categories: keep, sell, destroy. Adrian watched her. She could feel his eyes tracking her movements during meetings, could sense his attention like heat against her skin. But he didn't confront her again, didn't ask about the baby, didn't mention London. He was planning something. Elena could read it in the set of his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed against his desk during conference calls. Adrian Vale didn't accept defeat. He adapted, strategized, found angles other people missed, which was why Elena had to be smarter. Sophia Constantine arrived on a Friday afternoon, stepping out of a black Mercedes with the kind of grace that spoke of finishing schools and old money. She was beautiful in a cold, precise way, platinum hair pulled back in a severe chignon, ice blue eyes that cataloged everything they touched. Elena watched from Adrian's office as he greeted her in the lobby 63 floors below, watched him take her hand, watched them move together toward the elevators. They looked right together, matched, 2 pieces of the same brutal puzzle. "You okay?" Elena turned. Marcus Chen, Adrian's head of security, stood in the doorway. He was one of the few people in the organization who seemed to operate on something resembling a moral compass. "Fine," Elena said automatically. Marcus studied her with dark, knowing eyes. "He's making a mistake." "It's not a mistake, it's strategy." "Sometimes those are the same thing." Marcus moved into the room, his presence solid and somehow comforting. "You know he's been having you followed." Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "Not constantly, just enough to know your patterns. Where you go, who you see." Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. "He's worried about you. He's worried I'll run." "Can you blame him?" Elena turned back to the window. Below, Adrian and Sophia were entering the building. In 3 minutes, they'd be in this office. In 3 minutes, Elena would have to smile and offer congratulations and pretend her heart wasn't shattering into progressively smaller pieces. "I need to ask you something," she said quietly. Marcus waited. If someone wanted to disappear, really disappear, not just leave town but vanish completely, could they do it? From Adrian? Marcus considered the question seriously. It would be difficult. He has resources, connections, the kind of reach that most people underestimate. But possible. Possible, yes. But Elena... He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Are you sure this is what you want? Maybe if you just talk to him." He's getting married, Marcus. To secure an alliance, not because he loves her. The elevator chimed. Elena could hear voices in the hallway coming closer. Sophia's laugh, high and practiced. Adrian's response too quiet to make out the words. "Love doesn't matter," Elena said. "Not in his world." "Maybe not. But you matter." "I've worked for Adrian for 8 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." The door opened. Adrian entered first, his eyes finding Elena immediately. Behind him, Sophia Constantine surveyed the office with the air of someone taking inventory. "Elena," Adrian said, "this is Sophia Constantine. Sophia, my executive assistant, Elena Cross." Executive assistant. Not the mother of his child. Not the woman he'd held like she was precious. Just an employee. Elena extended her hand. Sophia's grip was cool and firm. "Charmed," Sophia said, in a voice that suggested she was anything but. "Adrian speaks very highly of your organizational skills." "I do my best." "I'm sure." Sophia's gaze was calculating. "Though I understand you'll be leaving us soon. London, is it?" Elena kept her expression neutral. "That's right. Pity. Good assistants are so difficult to find." Sophia turned to Adrian, dismissing Elena completely. "Shall we discuss the contracts? I have dinner plans at 8. They moved to the conference table. Elena gathered her tablet and notes, falling into the familiar rhythm of the job. Recording decisions. Flagging items for follow-up. Being invisible. But she could feel Adrian watching her, could feel the weight of questions he wasn't asking. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the time Sophia left, after a handshake that lingered just long enough to establish possession, Elena's jaw ached from holding her professional smile. "That went well," she said, making notes on her tablet. "Elena, I'll have the preliminary contracts drafted by Monday. The legal team will need to..." "Elena," Adrian's hand covered hers on the tablet, stopping her mid-sentence. "Look at me." She did. It was a mistake. His eyes were storm dark, and up close she could see the fatigue etched into the lines around them. "Is this really what you want?" he asked quietly. "What I want doesn't matter. Answer the question." Elena pulled her hand free. "You're getting married in 10 days. To a woman who will give you the alliance you need, the protection you need, the future you need. What I want is irrelevant. You're carrying my child. That's not irrelevant. Your child with your assistant. Your child that complicates everything. Your child that makes you vulnerable." Elena stood, gathering her things. "I'm giving you a way out, Adrian. You should take it. And if I don't want a way out..." The question hung between them, dangerous and full of possibility. Elena's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, still flat, still hiding the secret growing inside her. In a few months, it wouldn't be a secret anymore. In a few months, she'd be showing, and Adrian would have a wife, and this child would be born into a world that would see it as either a weapon or a weakness. She couldn't let that happen. "Then you're a fool," she said softly, "and I've never known you to be a fool." She walked out before he could respond, before she could change her mind, before she could do something stupid like tell him the truth, that she loved him, that she'd loved him for years, that 3 weeks ago hadn't been champagne and chemicals. It had been the culmination of every moment she'd stood beside him, every crisis they'd weathered together, every late night when his guard had slipped just enough for her to see the man beneath the armor, that she was terrified, not of disappearing, not of starting over, but of looking at her child and seeing Adrian's eyes staring back at her, of spending the rest of her life wondering what might have been if she'd been brave enough to stay. But bravery was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not anymore. So, 5 days before the wedding, Elena executed her exit strategy. It was surprisingly simple, in the end. A 6 a.m. flight to Miami under a name that wasn't quite hers, a connection to Charleston that left no digital footprint, a rental car paid for in cash, a furnished apartment in a quiet neighborhood where nobody asked questions. She left her phone in a dumpster in Queens, left her laptop wiped clean in a donation bin, left every piece of Elena Cross behind like she was shedding a skin. The woman who arrived in Charleston was someone new, someone quieter, someone who'd never worked for a shipping magnate with blood on his hands, someone who'd never felt Adrian Vale's mouth against her throat or heard him whisper promises in the dark. That woman found work at a small accounting firm, found a doctor who didn't judge, found an apartment with good light and neighbors who minded their own business. That woman built a life out of nothing. And at night, when this baby kicked and Elena's hands moved to her growing stomach, she told herself it was the right choice, the only choice. She told herself that Adrian would move on, that he'd marry Sophia Constantine and secure his empire and eventually forget about the assistant who'd disappeared, that he'd be safer this way, that they all would. She told herself a lot of things, but late at night, when Charleston was quiet and the weight of what she'd done pressed down like stones, Elena Cross allowed herself one truth. She would spend the rest of her life missing a man she could never have, and she would do it gladly if it meant keeping their child safe. 6 years had a way of reshaping a person. Elena discovered this truth gradually, in increments so small she barely noticed them accumulating. The first year in Charleston, she jumped at every unexpected knock on the door, every black car that lingered too long at the curb. She'd memorized exit routes from her apartment, kept a bag packed with cash and fake documents, slept with her phone within arm's reach, even though she knew Adrian couldn't track it. By the second year, the hypervigilance had dulled to a persistent low-level anxiety. She'd moved to a better neighborhood, accepted a promotion at Hendrick & Associates, started letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd actually escaped. By the time Micah turned 5, Elena had almost convinced herself that her old life had been a dream, or a nightmare. Something that happened to someone else. Almost. The boy made forgetting impossible. Micah Vale Cross, though the birth certificate only showed the cross part, had his father's eyes. Not the color, which was a warm brown like Elena's, but the intensity. The way he looked at things like he was calculating angles, measuring weaknesses, planning 3 moves ahead. At 6 years old, he could read at a 4th grade level, built structures with his blocks that demonstrated an understanding of physics that made his teachers nervous, and had a memory that retained everything. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy?" The question came on a Tuesday morning in October, while Elena was making breakfast and Micah was supposed to be getting dressed for school. He stood in the kitchen doorway in his Spider-Man pajamas, holding the stuffed elephant he'd had since he was 2, and the directness of the question hit Elena like a fist to the sternum. She'd prepared for this, had practiced answers in her head for years. But somehow, looking at her son's serious little face, all the rehearsed responses evaporated. "You do have a daddy," she said carefully, focusing on cracking eggs into a bowl. "Everyone has a daddy. But where is he? Far away. Why?" "Because sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices." Micah processed this with the same intensity he brought to everything. "Does he know about me?" Elena's hand stilled on the whisk. This was the knife's edge she'd been walking for 6 years. The place where truth and lies tangled into something she couldn't quite name. "It's complicated, baby. That's what you always say when you don't want to answer. Too smart." Her son was too damn smart. "Your father is a very important man," Elena said slowly. "He has responsibilities. A whole company to run. Lots of people depending on him." "More important than me?" The question cracked something in Elena's chest. She set down the whisk and knelt in front of Micah, taking his small hands in hers. "Nothing is more important than you," she said fiercely. "Not to me. Never to me. But to him." Elena pulled Micah into a hug, pressing her face into his dark hair that was just starting to show hints of Adrian's texture. "Your father doesn't know you yet. If he did, you'd be the most important thing in his world too." It was the closest she'd come to the truth in 6 years. Micah hugged her back, then pulled away with the resilient pragmatism of childhood. "Can I have chocolate chips in my pancakes?" "Nice try. Get dressed." He ran off, crisis apparently resolved for now. Elena stood slowly, her knees protesting. She was 34 now. Not old, but old enough to feel the weight of 6 years of looking over her shoulder. 6 years of building a life on a foundation of carefully maintained lies. Her phone buzzed. Work. Elena glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. A meeting. This afternoon. With potential new clients referred by Hendrick's corporate connections. The message was vague on details, which wasn't unusual, but something about the timing made Elena's old instincts flare. She told herself she was being paranoid. She'd been telling herself that for 6 years. Hendrick and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a restored historic building in downtown Charleston. It was a small firm, just 8 accountants and a handful of support staff, specializing in forensic accounting and financial investigations. Elena had started as a junior analyst and worked her way up to senior investigator, building a reputation for finding patterns in data that other people missed. It was good work, honest work. The kind of thing that let her sleep at night, mostly. The conference room was already occupied when Elena arrived at 2:30. Derek Hendrick, the firm's founder, sat at the head of the table with 2 men Elena didn't recognize. They wore expensive suits and had the kind of stillness that spoke of military backgrounds or worse. "Elena, good," Derek said, standing. "These are representatives from Meridian Consolidated. They're looking for help with some financial irregularities in one of their subsidiary operations." Elena shook hands with both men, noting the way their eyes cataloged her. Professional assessment, nothing more, but it made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "What kind of irregularities?" she asked, sliding into a chair. The first man, who'd introduced himself as Mr. Patterson, opened a briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. "We've been seeing unusual transaction patterns in our Charleston warehouse operations. Money moving in ways that don't match the manifest records. We need someone who can trace the discrepancies without alerting the local management." You think someone's stealing?" "We think someone's creative." Patterson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We'd like you to conduct a quiet audit. Review the books, check the physical inventory against the records, identify where the leaks are." It was exactly the kind of work Elena specialized in, the kind of investigation that let her use all the skills she'd developed working for Adrian, skills she'd spent 6 years trying to forget she had. "When would you need me to start?" "Tonight, if possible. We've arranged access to the facility after hours. Minimal staff on site." Every instinct Elena had developed in Adrian's world was screaming at her to refuse, to walk away, to not go anywhere near a warehouse operation referred through mysterious corporate channels. But 6 years in Charleston had taught her a different lesson, that paranoia was exhausting, that not every shadow held a threat, that sometimes a warehouse audit was just a warehouse audit. "I'll need to arrange childcare," she said, "but I can be there by 8. Derek looked pleased. Patterson and his silent partner exchanged a glance that Elena couldn't quite read. "Excellent," Patterson said. "We'll email you the address and access codes." The meeting wrapped up quickly after that. Elena gathered her things, already mentally running through her list of backup babysitters. Mrs. Chen from downstairs could usually be relied on for last-minute requests. She was halfway to her office when Derek caught up with her. "Elena, a word?" They stepped into his private office. Derek closed the door, which he almost never did. "I need you to be careful with this one," he said, without preamble. Elena's stomach tightened. "Why?" "Meridian Consolidated is a shell company, 3 layers deep at least. The real ownership is buried behind enough legal entities that I couldn't trace it without raising flags." "Then why did you take the job?" "Because they're paying triple our usual rate. Because turning down that kind of money raises different kinds of flags. And because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I trust you to handle whatever you find in a way that protects this firm." Translation: If Elena found something illegal, she needed to document it carefully and extract herself without blowback. "Understood," Elena said. "I mean it, Elena. If anything feels wrong, you walk away. No job is worth—" "I know." She managed a smile. "I've walked away from worse than a shady warehouse operation." It was more truth than she'd intended to share. Derek studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 8 o'clock. Don't go alone. Take Jim from security with you." "Derek, non-negotiable. If this is innocent, an extra body won't hurt. If it's not—" He shrugged. "Jim's ex-military. He knows how to handle himself." Elena agreed because arguing would raise more questions than it answered. She spent the rest of the afternoon organizing her notes and trying not to think about the last time she'd investigated financial irregularities in a shipping operation, trying not to remember Adrian's voice, cold and precise, as he'd explained exactly how money could be moved through legitimate channels to fund decidedly illegitimate operations, trying not to wonder if 6 years had really been long enough. Mrs. Chen was happy to watch Micah. Elena fed him dinner, supervised homework, and read him 2 chapters of his current obsession, a book about deep-sea creatures that most adults would find disturbing. She tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and told him she'd be home before he woke up. "Be safe, Mommy," Micah said, already half asleep. "Always, baby." The warehouse was in an industrial area south of the city, surrounded by similar structures that looked abandoned in the darkness. Jim drove, his presence solid and somehow reassuring despite Elena barely knowing him. He'd worked security at Hendrick and Associates for 3 years, said little, and had the kind of awareness that came from training most people never received. "You ever do this kind of thing before?" he asked as they pulled up to a chain-link gate. "Once or twice." Elena climbed out, punching the access code Patterson had provided into the keypad. The gate rolled open with a metallic shriek that echoed in the empty night. The warehouse itself was massive, a sprawling building with loading docks on 3 sides and minimal exterior lighting. A single car sat in the parking lot, probably the night security Patterson had mentioned. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Patterson with the interior access codes and a reminder to be thorough. Something about the message felt off, too formal, too precise. "You good?" Jim asked, noticing her hesitation. "Yeah, just checking the codes." They entered through a side door. The interior was what Elena expected. Rows of industrial shelving, pallets of goods wrapped in plastic, the smell of concrete and old cardboard. Fluorescent lights flickered on as they moved deeper into the space, triggered by motion sensors. "Where's the office?" Jim asked. Elena consulted the building schematic Patterson had sent. "Second floor, northeast corner." They climbed a metal staircase that rang under their feet. The office was a glass-walled room overlooking the warehouse floor, furnished with cheap desks and filing cabinets that had seen better decades. Elena booted up the computer, logged in with the credentials Patterson had provided, and pulled up the financial records. It took her approximately 15 minutes to spot the problem. "Jesus," she muttered. "What?" "This isn't creative accounting. This is a shell game." Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up transaction records and cross-referencing them against manifests. Money's coming in from at least 6 different sources, getting cleaned through inventory purchases that don't match what's actually on the shelves, then moving out to... She stopped, stared at the screen. The final destination accounts were coded, but Elena recognized the structure. She'd seen it before. 6 years ago, in a different city, working for a different man. This was one of Adrienne's operations. Not directly. The ownership was buried under enough shell companies and legal entities that no investigation would connect it to Vale Shipping. But Elena knew his patterns, knew the way he structured these things, knew the specific routing numbers and account types he preferred. Her hands had gone numb. Elena? Jim was at her shoulder now. What is it? We need to leave. What? We just got here. Now. We need to leave now. The urgency in her voice must have registered. Jim didn't argue, just started shutting down the computer. Elena grabbed her bag, her mind racing. This was a setup. Had to be. But for what purpose? Why bring her here? Why now, after 6 years of silence? They were halfway down the stairs when the warehouse lights cut out. All of them, simultaneously. The motion sensors, the overheads, everything. Complete darkness dropped over them like a blanket. Jim's hand found her arm. Don't move. Elena could hear her heartbeat in her ears. Could hear something else, too. Movement. Multiple people moving through the warehouse with the confidence of those who knew the space. This way, Jim whispered, guiding her back up the stairs. The office has a window, fire escape on the outside. They moved in darkness, Jim's military training keeping them quiet. Behind them, voices called out in what might have been Russian or Ukrainian. Elena's blood turned to ice. The Constantines. They reached the office. Jim felt along the wall, found the window, started working the latch. It was painted shut. Hold on, he muttered, pulling something from his jacket. A multi-tool. He worked at the paint seal with the knife blade, while Elena watched the dark warehouse through the glass wall. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness below. 4 men, maybe 5, moving in a search pattern. Looking for something, looking for her. The window popped open. Jim tested the fire escape. Metal, rusty, but stable. You first, he said. Jim, not negotiable. I'm right behind you. Elena climbed through, the metal cold under her hands. The fire escape clung to the side of the building, a rickety zigzag of stairs and landings. She started down, trying to move quietly despite the structure's tendency to groan and shift. 2 floors down, she heard voices, coming from below. More men circling the building. They were surrounded. Jim grabbed her arm, pulling her onto the 2nd floor landing. Back inside, different exit. But before they could move, the window above them exploded outward in a shower of glass. Someone had fired from inside the office, the shot wild but close enough to make Elena's ears ring. Jim shoved her against the wall, his body shielding hers. Stay down. More shots. Return fire from below. The fire escape shuddered and groaned, bullets punching through metal. And then a voice cut through the chaos, amplified and unmistakable. Hold your fire. Elena's entire body went rigid. She knew that voice, would know it anywhere, even after 6 years of silence. Adrienne. The shooting stopped. In the sudden quiet, Elena could hear footsteps on the fire escape, coming up from below, measured and unhurried. Adrienne Vale emerged from the darkness like something inevitable. He looked the same, different, the same sharp features, the same dangerous grace, but there were lines around his eyes now that hadn't been there before. Silver threading through his dark hair. He wore all black, tactical gear that suggested this wasn't a business call. His eyes locked on Elena, and the world contracted to just that point of contact. Hello, Elena. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. 6 years of running, of hiding, of building a new life, and in one moment it all came crashing down. Adrienne looked at Jim, who still stood between Elena and the stairs. You can go. This doesn't concern you. I'm not leaving her. I'm not asking. Adrienne's voice carried the kind of authority that made men with guns hesitate. You're outmatched and outgunned. Walk away while you can. Jim looked at Elena. She managed to nod. It's okay. Go. Elena, please. He hesitated one more second, then moved past Adrian down the stairs. The other men let him pass. Elena watched him disappear into the darkness, taking her last line of defense with him. Then it was just her and Adrian, standing on a fire escape in the Charleston rain that had started to fall without her noticing. 6 years, Adrian said quietly. 6 years, Elena. Did you really think I wouldn't find you? I thought you'd stopped looking. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I never stopped. Not for a single day. He moved closer, and Elena saw the anger beneath his control, saw something else too, something that looked like pain. London. That was clever. Led me on a chase halfway around the world before I realized it was a dead end. By the time I figured it out, you'd disappeared completely. That was the point. Where's my child? The question was quiet, deadly. Elena's hand moved unconsciously to her jacket pocket, where her phone held 1,000 pictures of Micah. Pictures she'd taken over 6 years of birthday parties and first days of school and ordinary moments that Adrian had missed. Safe, she said. Far from here. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Adrian's jaw tightened. He was close enough now that Elena could see the pulse in his throat, could smell the rain mixing with that familiar scent that still haunted her sometimes in the dark. You lied to me, he said. You looked me in the eye and told me you were leaving the country, that you were starting a new life. I believed you, Elena. I let you go because I thought— He stopped, controlling himself with visible effort. I thought you'd be safer away from me. I am safer. My son is safer. My son. The words came out sharp. My son, Elena. You don't get to decide that I don't have a right to him. I get to decide what's best for him. And being a target in your world is not what's best. You don't know what's best for him. You don't know him. And whose fault is that? Adrian's voice rose for the first time, the control cracking. You took him. You stole 6 years of his life from me. 6 years I can never get back. I protected him. From what? From me? From having a father? From being leverage, Elena shouted back, rain streaming down her face. From being the thing your enemies use to hurt you. From growing up in a world where people solve problems with bullets and bodies end up in the harbor. That's not your wife. Elena cut him off. How is Sofia? Still running the Ukrainian operations? Still consolidating power? Or did that alliance not work out the way you planned? Something flickered across Adrian's face. That's none of your business. Then my son is none of yours. Elena! A shout from below interrupted them. One of Adrian's men, urgent and alarmed. Adrian's head snapped toward the sound, his body going tense. What? He called down. Multiple vehicles approaching, unknown configuration, armed. Adrian's expression went cold and calculating. He looked at Elena, making some kind of decision in the space between heartbeats. How many? He shouted down. At least 3 SUVs, heavy weapons. Adrian grabbed Elena's arm. We need to move. Now. I'm not going anywhere with you. You are, unless you want to die in the next 60 seconds. He was already pulling her down the fire escape, moving fast. Those aren't my people, which means they're here for the same reason I am. What reason? You. They hit the ground running. Adrian's men formed up around them, moving toward 2 black vehicles parked behind the warehouse. This facility is a trap, Elena, designed to draw you out. I got here first, but whoever set this up isn't far behind. The Constantines. Among others. Adrian shoved her toward the nearest vehicle. Get in. The first shots came before Elena could respond. Not aimed at them, aimed at the warehouse itself. Explosions ripped through the building, fire blooming orange against the night sky. Adrian's body slammed into Elena's, driving her to the ground behind the vehicle as debris rained down around them. His weight pressed her into the wet asphalt, his arms locked around her head. Stay down, he growled in her ear. More explosions. The entire warehouse complex going up in a coordinated strike. Elena could feel the heat even from behind the vehicle, could hear Adrian's men returning fire at unseen targets. Then Adrian was hauling her up, shoving her into the back seat of the SUV. He climbed in after her, yelling orders to the driver. Go! 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 The vehicle lurched forward. Bullets punched through the rear window, safety glass spiderwebbing, but holding. Elena found herself pressed against Adrian's chest as he covered her with his body, one hand holding her down while the other pulled a gun from somewhere. The world dissolved into chaos. Screeching tires, gunfire. The driver taking corners at speeds that made the vehicle tilt onto two wheels. Adrian's hand tight in Elena's hair, holding her against him, his body a shield between her and the windows. And through it all, one thought kept circulating through Elena's mind. Micah. She had to get back to Micah. The vehicle didn't stop until they were 20 miles outside Charleston, pulled off onto a service road hidden by trees. Elena's ears were still ringing from the gunfire. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Adrian finally released her, sitting back against the seat. His face was controlled again, but Elena could see blood seeping through his jacket sleeve. "You're shot," she said. "Grazed." He didn't look at the wound. "Where is he, Elena?" "I need to call... Where's my son?" The driver and the man in the passenger seat were both watching them in the rear-view mirror. Elena recognized neither of them, but they had that same trained stillness as all of Adrian's security people. Men who'd seen violence and dealt it back without hesitation. "I need my phone," Elena said. "I need to make sure he's safe." Adrian pulled out his own phone, unlocked it, handed it over. "No games. Call whoever has him. Make sure he's secure. Then you tell me where he is." Elena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial Mrs. Chen's number. It rang 4 times before the older woman answered, sounding groggy. "Wei? Mrs. Chen, it's Elena. Is Micah okay?" "Elena, yes, he's fine. Sleeping. Why are you... I need you to do something for me." Elena forced her voice steady. "I need you to take Micah to your daughter's house. Right now. Don't pack anything. Just get him in the car and go." "What's wrong?" "Please, I'll explain later. Just keep him safe." There was a pause. Mrs. Chen had lived through enough in her 70 years to recognize real fear when she heard it. Okay, I go now. Don't tell anyone where you're taking him. Not anyone. I'll call you in a few hours." Elena hung up. Adrian was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "He's with a neighbor," Elena said. "She's moving him somewhere secure." "Where?" "I don't know. That's the point." She handed back his phone. "What the hell was that, Adrian? What was that warehouse?" "A trap. Set by people who've been looking for you almost as long as I have. The Constantines. Among others." Adrian looked out the window at the dark trees. "Your disappearance created questions. Questions I couldn't answer. Questions that made me look weak." "So this is about your reputation?" "This is about the fact that everyone I've ever crossed thinks you know something." Adrian's voice was hard. "Thinks you took something when you left. Documentation, maybe. Financial records. Evidence that could bring down my entire operation." Elena's blood went cold. Because he wasn't wrong. She had taken documentation, not as insurance, not as leverage, but as protection. Proof of everything Adrian had done, everything he was, stored in encrypted files she'd never accessed in 6 years. She'd forgotten about it, had buried it so deep in her mind that it might as well not exist, but someone else hadn't forgotten. "I don't have anything," she said. "I know that. I told them that. But the Constantines..." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Sophia wants proof, and she's not the only one. There are 3 families right now who think you're either a threat or a resource. Either way, they want you found." "Because of the marriage, because I disappeared right before..." Elena stopped, something clicking into place. "You didn't marry her." It wasn't a question. Adrian's silence was answer enough. "What happened?" Elena asked. "That's not important. You're here. 6 years later, tracking me down, with people trying to kill both of us. I think it's pretty damn important." Adrian turned to look at her. In the dim light of the vehicle, his eyes were black. "I called it off," he said, 3 days before the wedding. Told the Constantines the alliance was dead. Told them I wouldn't be bought. Elena's chest felt tight. "Why?" "Because you were gone. Because I had a child somewhere in the world that I couldn't find. Because every scenario I ran ended with you and that baby dead, if I tied myself to the Constantines." His voice was flat, reciting facts. "So I burned that bridge, started a war instead, and for 6 years I've been fighting it while trying to find you. You started a war over me, over my son. Adrian's correction was sharp, over the fact that he wouldn't let anyone use him as leverage before I even knew him. The distinction felt important, though Elena couldn't say why. She looked down at her hands, still shaking slightly. 6 years of running, 6 years of building a quiet life, and in one night, it had all come apart. The warehouse was bait, she said slowly, working through it. Someone found out where I was, set up a situation they knew would draw me out. Patterson doesn't exist. Meridian Consolidated is a shell. The whole thing was designed to get you into that warehouse at a specific time. How did you know? Because I've had alerts running for 6 years on every major city in the eastern United States. Financial transactions matching your patterns. Professional moves that fit your skill set. 3 weeks ago, something pinged in Charleston. A forensic accountant who'd appeared out of nowhere 6 years ago. No employment history before that. No digital footprint. Adrian's mouth twisted. I came to verify. Found the trap being set. Got here 30 minutes before they did. You've been in Charleston for 3 weeks. 2.5. Watching you. Making sure. He paused. Making sure you were real. That I'd actually found you. Elena tried to process that. Adrian in Charleston, watching her go to work, pick up Micah from school, live her ordinary life. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something closer to exhaustion. What now? She asked. Now we make sure our son is somewhere they can't reach him. Then we deal with the people who want you dead. Our son. Elena laughed, the sound harsh. You don't even know his name. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Tell me. Why should I? Because he's mine. Because I've spent 6 years not knowing. Because... Adrian stopped, the control cracking slightly. Please. The plea, quiet and raw, hit Elena harder than any threat could have. Micah, she said. His name is Micah. Adrian repeated it silently, like he was testing how it felt. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. We need to move. They're still tracking us. How? Your phone. They must have tagged it somehow. Adrian looked at the driver. Marcus, get us to the safe house. Lose anyone following. Marcus. Elena recognized the name. The same man who'd warned her about Adrian having her followed, all those years ago. You still work for him, she said. Marcus met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Never stopped, even when the boss was tearing apart 3 continents looking for you. The vehicle pulled back onto the road. Elena watched the trees blur past, her mind racing. Micah was safe with Mrs. Chen. For now. But safe houses and protection details weren't permanent solutions. Eventually they'd have to surface. And when they did, the people hunting them would be waiting. I can't do this, Elena said. I can't bring Micah into your world. That's exactly what I was trying to avoid. You don't have a choice anymore. They know about him now, know he exists. The moment you showed up at that warehouse, you confirmed every suspicion they had. Then I'll run again. Disappear better this time. They'll find you. Adrian's voice was certain. They found you this time, and you were careful. You were smart. You did everything right. But they still found you, Elena. And next time, I might not get there first. The truth of it settled over her like weight. She'd been running for 6 years, and it hadn't been enough. Would never be enough. Because the thing about Adrian Vale's world was that once you were in it, you didn't just walk away. She'd tried, and all she'd done was delay the inevitable. So what do you suggest? Elena asked tiredly. I bring Micah to you? Let him grow up surrounded by guards and guns and people who want to use him to hurt you? I suggest you let me protect you both. Let me end this threat. Then we figure out the rest. Just like that. You'll end it. Yes. The certainty in his voice should have been arrogant. Instead, it just sounded exhausted, like Adrian had been fighting for so long that ending one more war was just another item on an endless list. They drove for another 20 minutes before pulling into the driveway of a house that looked like every other suburban home on the street. 2 stories, attached garage, probably 3 bedrooms. Completely unremarkable. Inside was a different story. Security cameras covered every angle, reinforced doors, windows that Elena suspected were bulletproof, and in the living room, a bank of monitors showing feeds from what had to be a dozen different locations. This is the safe house? Elena asked. One of them. Adrian moved to the monitors, scanning the feeds. I have 3 in Charleston, 2 in Savannah, 1 in Charlotte. This was closest. Marcus disappeared into another room. The second security guard took up position by the front door, earpiece in, scanning something on his phone. Elena stood in the middle of the living room and tried to remember how to breathe. Sit, Adrian said, not looking away from the monitors. You're about to fall over. She was. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving her shaky and sick. Elena sank onto the couch, putting her head between her knees. There's water in the kitchen, Adrian added, and food, if you need it. What I need is to wake up from this nightmare. You and me both. The quiet agreement made Elena look up. Adrian was still watching the monitors, but his shoulders were tight with tension. The blood on his sleeve had dried to a dark stain. He looked like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. Let me see your arm, Elena said. It's fine. Let me see it anyway. Adrian hesitated, then shrugged out of his jacket. The bullet had torn through his shirt sleeve, leaving a gash that was still seeping blood. Not deep enough to be life-threatening, but not exactly minor either. Elena found a first aid kit in the bathroom, because of course Adrian's safe house had a fully stocked medical kit. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic while Adrian watched the monitors, his jaw tight. This needs stitches, she said. Later. Adrian, I said later, but his voice was softer now. Thank you. Elena taped gauze over the wound, her fingers steady despite everything. It was strange being this close to him again, strange and familiar in equal measure. She could feel the heat of his skin, smell the mix of rain and gunpowder, and that underlying scent that was just him. 6 years, and her body still recognized him. Why did you really call off the wedding? She asked quietly. Adrian's eyes met hers. I told you. You told me part of it, but there's more. I can see it. He was quiet for a long moment. On the monitors, the feeds showed empty streets, quiet houses, a city that had no idea what had just happened in that warehouse. Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, Adrian finally said. Because every time I looked at Sophia, I saw you walking out of my office. Because I woke up every morning not knowing if my child was alive or dead, and I couldn't... He stopped, his jaw working. I couldn't pretend it didn't matter. Couldn't marry someone else while you were out there somewhere with my baby. Elena's throat was tight. That was stupid. The alliance could have protected you, protected all of us. Maybe. Or maybe it would have given the Constantines exactly the leverage they needed to find you first. Adrian's hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek. I made my choice, Elena. I chose you, even not knowing where you were, even thinking I might never find you. That's not... Whatever she was going to say died when the monitors suddenly went dark. All of them, simultaneously. Adrian was on his feet instantly, gun in hand. Marcus! Got it! Marcus's voice came from the other room, tense and focused. Someone's jamming the feeds. 3 vehicles 2 blocks out and closing. How many? At least 6 hostiles, maybe more. Adrian grabbed Elena's arm, hauling her toward the back of the house. Basement, now! What about... Move, Elena. They hit the basement stairs at a run. It wasn't a normal basement. No water heater, no storage boxes, no laundry setup. Just concrete walls, another bank of monitors, and a weapons locker that made Elena's stomach turn. Adrian opened the locker, pulling out body armor. He threw a vest at Elena. Put that on. I don't... Put it on. He was already strapping on his own armor, moving with the efficiency of long practice. When they breach, you stay down here. There's a tunnel behind that wall. He pointed to what looked like solid concrete. Push the 3rd brick from the floor. It'll open. Tunnel leads 3 blocks east to a parking garage. There's a car waiting, keys in the visor. Elena's hands were shaking again as she struggled with the vest. Adrian moved to help her, his fingers quick and certain on the straps. If something happens to me, he said quietly, meeting her eyes, you take that tunnel and you run. You get to Micah and you disappear so deep that no one ever finds you. Adrian, promise me. I'm not... Glass shattered upstairs. Voices shouted in Russian. Gunfire erupted, sharp and close. Adrian grabbed her face in both hands, forcing her to look at him. Promise me, Elena. Promise me you'll protect our son. Their son. Not his. Theirs. I promise, Elena whispered. He kissed her. Hard and desperate, like it might be the last time. Like 6 years hadn't passed. Like they were back in that hotel room at the plaza, before everything fell apart. Then he was gone, taking the stairs 3 at a time, leaving Elena alone in the basement with the sound of warfare raging above her. She'd promised to run, to escape, to protect Micah. But as the gunfire intensified, as she heard Marcus shouting and Adrian's voice cutting through the chaos, Elena found herself frozen, found herself unable to do the smart thing, the safe thing. Because 6 years ago, she'd run from Adrian Vale to protect their child, and she'd spent every day since wondering if she'd made the right choice. The sound of boots on the floor above made the decision for her. Elena moved to the wall, found the third brick pressed. A section of concrete swung inward, revealing darkness and the smell of damp earth. She should go, should run like Adrian ordered, should think of Micah, safe with Mrs. Chen, waiting for his mother to come home. Instead, Elena found herself climbing back up the stairs. The main floor was chaos. 2 bodies on the floor, Adrian's men or the attackers. Elena couldn't tell. Bullet holes in the walls, the front door hanging off its hinges. Marcus was behind the kitchen counter, firing at figures visible through the shattered windows. Adrian was nowhere to be seen. "Where is he?" Elena shouted over the gunfire. Marcus didn't look at her. "Told you to run." "Where's Adrian?" "Upstairs, trying to flank them." "Elena, you need to—" An explosion cut him off. The front window blew inward completely, and 3 men in tactical gear came through the opening. Marcus took down one, but the other 2 had him pinned. Elena did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed a lamp from the side table and threw it at the nearest attacker. It hit him in the head, not hard enough to do real damage, but enough to distract him. Enough for Adrian to appear at the top of the stairs and put 2 bullets in the man's chest. The second attacker swung his weapon toward Adrian. Elena screamed a warning. Adrian dropped flat, bullets chewing up the wall behind him. And then everything seemed to happen in slow motion. The attacker adjusted his aim. Marcus was still pinned. Adrian was exposed on the stairs. Elena saw the exact moment the man's finger tightened on the trigger. Saw Adrian's eyes meet hers across the chaos. Saw him realize he wasn't going to be fast enough. Then Marcus broke cover, taking the shot meant for Adrian, and went down hard. Adrian's returning fire dropped the last attacker. Then silence, broken only by the sound of Marcus's labored breathing. Adrian was at his side instantly. "Marcus, stay with me." "Boss," Marcus coughed, blood on his lips. "Got him. Got the bastard." "You're fine. You're going to be fine." But Elena could see the wound. Center mass. Too much blood. Marcus had taken a bullet meant for Adrian, and they all knew what that meant. "Elena." Marcus's eyes found her. "Get her out. Get them both out. I'm not leaving you." "Not a request." Marcus's hand grabbed Adrian's shirt. "Your family. Protect your family." He died before Adrian could respond. Just stopped breathing, his hand going slack. Adrian stayed frozen for 5 seconds that felt like forever. Then he stood, his face a mask, and turned to Elena. "We're leaving. Now." "Adrian, I said now." He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the house. More vehicles were pulling up outside. They were out of time. The tunnel was dark and close, barely wide enough for one person. Adrian went first, Elena right behind him, the sound of voices and boots echoing from the house they'd just left. They emerged in a parking garage 3 blocks away, just like Adrian had said. The car was a nondescript sedan that probably cost more than Elena's yearly salary. Adrian had them moving before she'd even closed her door. "Where are we going?" Elena asked. "Somewhere they won't follow." "Where?" Adrian's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "To get our son. Then somewhere safe. Somewhere I can end this once and for all." His voice was flat. Empty. The voice of a man who just watched someone die for him and couldn't afford to process it yet. Elena looked at him, really looked at him. At the blood on his clothes, the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, the way his jaw was locked, so tight it had to hurt. This was Adrian Vale, the man she'd loved, the man she'd run from, the man who'd just lost someone protecting her. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "about Marcus." "Don't." The word came out harsh. Don't apologize. He made his choice. Adrian, he died because you were there, because I brought you into this. Because 6 years ago you ran instead of trusting me to protect you, and now he stopped breathing hard. Now people are dying, and my son is out there without me, and I don't even know what he looks like. The accusation cut deep because it was true. All of it. I was protecting him, Elena said. From me. From your world. They're the same thing. Adrian slammed his hand against the steering wheel. Don't you get it? I am my world. You can't separate the two. And by running, by hiding him from me, all you did was make sure that when they finally found you, I wouldn't be there to stop it. You're there now. 6 years too late. The silence that fell between them was heavy with everything unsaid. 6 years of fear and anger and regret, all compressed into this moment. Elena's phone, the burner she kept for emergencies, buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, not recognizing the number. Hello? Elena Cross? A woman's voice, cold and precise. Or should I say Elena Vale? Elena's blood turned to ice. Who is this? Someone who has information you want. About your son. If you've touched him, he's safe. For now. But that could change very quickly. A pause. I'm sending you an address. You have 1 hour. Come alone, or the boy dies. The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone as a text came through. An address on the outskirts of Charleston, and a photo. Micah, sleeping in what looked like a car. Someone had taken this photo tonight. They have him, Elena whispered. They have my son. Adrian took the phone, looked at the image, and something in his expression went absolutely cold. No, he said quietly. They have our son, and they just made the last mistake of their lives. Adrian made 3 phone calls in the span of 2 minutes. His voice clipped and controlled despite the rage Elena could see simmering beneath the surface. Each call was brief, efficient, the kind of orders that didn't require explanation because the people on the other end already understood what was at stake. How long ago was this photo taken? He asked, handing back Elena's phone. Elena studied the image, her hands shaking. Micah was in a car seat, his head tilted to one side in sleep, still wearing the Spider-Man pajamas she'd put him in hours ago. The angle suggested someone had leaned in through an open window. Recently. Those are the pajamas from tonight, her voice cracked. Adrian, Mrs. Chen wouldn't have just handed him over. She wouldn't. I know. Adrian's jaw was tight, which means they either took him by force or convinced her they were with you. Either way, she's probably... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Elena's chest felt like it was caving in. Mrs. Chen, who'd babysat Micah since he was 6 months old. Who made him dumplings on Sundays and taught him to count in Mandarin. Who'd become the closest thing to family Elena had in Charleston. This is my fault, Elena whispered. I brought this to her door. Stop. Adrian's hand covered hers. This is on them, on whoever took him, not you. But it was on her. Every choice she'd made for 6 years, every decision meant to keep Micah safe, had led to this moment, to her son in the hands of people who saw him as nothing more than leverage. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something in his expression shifted. What? Elena asked. That was Dmitri. He just confirmed something I suspected. Adrian pulled the car onto a side street, killed the engine. The Constantines didn't set the warehouse trap. Then who? Sophia. The name came out like a curse. She's been operating independently for the past 18 months, building her own network, using her family's resources but not reporting to them. Elena tried to process that. Why? Because I embarrassed her, called off the wedding 3 days before it happened and made her look weak in front of every family in the eastern seaboard. Adrian's fingers drummed against the steering wheel. She's been hunting you ever since. Not for her family, for herself. To get back at you. To prove she's more ruthless than I am. That she can find what I couldn't. He looked at Elena, and there was something raw in his expression. She knows taking Micah will force me to make a choice. Come for him and walk into whatever trap she set, or let him die and prove I'm not the threat everyone thinks I am. That's not a choice. No, it's not. Adrian started the car again, which is exactly what she's counting on. They drove in silence for several minutes. Elena kept looking at the photo, memorizing every detail. Micah's sleep-slack face, the way his hand was curled against his chest, clutching that stupid elephant he'd had since he was 2, the small mole on his left cheek that Elena had kissed 1,000 times. "Tell me about him," Adrian said quietly. The request caught Elena off guard. "What?" "Our son. Tell me about him, what he's like, what makes him laugh, what scares him." Adrian's voice was carefully neutral, but Elena could hear the hunger beneath it. "I need to know him before I walk into whatever's waiting." Elena swallowed hard. "He's smart. Too smart sometimes. He figures things out faster than he should and asks questions that don't have easy answers. Like his mother. Like both of us." Elena managed a small smile. "He's obsessed with deep-sea creatures right now. Has books about them everywhere. He tells me facts about anglerfish and giant squids while I'm trying to make breakfast. What else? He's careful. Watches people before he trusts them. Takes his time with new situations." Elena's throat was tight. "He has nightmares sometimes, dreams about things chasing him, and he can't run fast enough. I tell him monsters aren't real, but he looks at me like he knows I'm lying. Because Micah was Adrian's son, and some part of him, some instinct buried in his DNA, understood that the world was full of monsters that looked like men." "Does he ask about me?" Adrian's voice was rough. "All the time." Elena looked down at her hands. "I told him you were important, that you had responsibilities. I tried not to lie, but I also couldn't tell him the truth. That his father is a criminal. That his father lives in a world where people use children as weapons." Elena met Adrian's eyes. "I couldn't tell him that. Couldn't make him afraid of you before he even knew you." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "What did you plan to tell him? Eventually?" "I don't know. I kept thinking I'd have more time, that I could wait until he was older, better able to understand." She laughed bitterly. "I was an idiot. You were protecting him. I was lying to him, and to myself, pretending we could live normal lives when there's nothing normal about any of this." The address Sophia had sent was an abandoned industrial complex on the edge of the city. Shipping containers stacked in rusting piles, cracked asphalt, buildings with broken windows. The kind of place where bodies turned up and nobody asked questions. Adrian parked 3 blocks away, in the shadow of a defunct factory. He pulled a second gun from under the seat, checked the magazine, handed it to Elena. "You remember how to use this?" Elena took the weapon, the weight familiar despite 6 years of not touching one. Adrian had insisted she learn, back when she worked for him. Self-defense, he'd called it. Insurance. "Yes," she said. "Good, because we're walking into a kill box, and I need you to be ready." They said come alone. "They also have our son. I'm not trusting a word they say." Adrian was loading extra magazines into his pockets, moving with controlled precision. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going in first. You stay back, cover position, watch for movement. If this goes wrong, if they start shooting, you do not try to be a hero. You find Micah and you run. I'm not leaving you." "Elena, 6 years ago, I left you. I spent every day since wondering if I made the right choice. I'm not doing it again." She checked her own weapon, the muscle memory coming back despite the years. "We go in together, or I go in first and you cover me. Your choice." Adrian stared at her like he was seeing someone new, or maybe someone he'd forgotten existed beneath 6 years of distance. "Together," he finally said. "But you follow my lead. If I say run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." They moved through the industrial complex like ghosts, using the shipping containers as cover. The place was quiet. Too quiet. No guards visible, no movement, nothing but the sound of wind rattling through broken windows. "This feels wrong," Elena whispered. Adrian nodded. He was scanning rooftops, looking for sniper positions. "She wants me focused on Micah. Wants me emotional and sloppy." "Are you? Emotional?" Terrified. The admission was quiet. "I've faced down syndicates and federal investigations and hostile takeovers. None of it scared me like this." They reached the central building, a 3-story structure with loading docks on one side. The bay doors were open, darkness visible inside. Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from the same number that had contacted Elena. Inside, third floor, alone. Or we start removing fingers. Elena felt bile rise in her throat. Adrian's face went absolutely flat, the mask he wore when emotion was a liability. Stay here, he said. Give me 5 minutes. If I'm not back, 5 minutes, then I'm coming in. He looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. Adrian moved toward the building, disappearing into the darkness of the loading dock. Elena counted seconds, her heart hammering. The gun in her hand felt heavy. She'd never actually shot anyone, had trained, had practiced, but pulling a trigger on a paper target was different from pulling it on a person. She'd do it now, though. For Micah. For Adrian. She'd do things she'd spent 6 years running from. 4 minutes passed. Then Elena heard it. A sound that made her blood freeze. Micah, crying. Not the normal crying of a scared child. High-pitched, panicked, the sound of real terror. Elena was moving before conscious thought kicked in. Through the loading dock, into the building, following the sound of her son's cries. Up a stairwell that smelled like rust and old concrete. Second floor, third floor, a hallway, offices on either side, doors hanging open or missing entirely. At the end, light spilling from a doorway. Elena approached carefully, weapon raised. She could hear voices now. A woman's, cold and amused. Adrian's, tight with barely controlled rage. You should see your face, the woman, Sophia, was saying. 6 years of searching, and this is how you finally meet him. Fitting, don't you think? Elena reached the doorway and stopped. The room had been an executive office once. Now it was stripped bare except for a single chair in the center. Adrian stood 10 feet from that chair, hands visible at his sides, no weapon drawn. 3 armed men flanked him, guns trained on his center mass. And in the chair, wrists zip-tied to the armrests, was Micah. Elena's son looked so small in that chair. His face was tear-streaked, his eyes huge with fear. He wasn't crying anymore, just making small whimpering sounds like a wounded animal. Sophia Constantine stood behind the chair, one hand resting on Micah's shoulder. She was exactly as Elena remembered. Platinum hair, ice blue eyes, expensive clothes that somehow made her look even more dangerous. Elena. Sophia's smile was sharp. I was wondering when you'd arrive. I told Adrian to come alone, but I suppose parents don't follow instructions well when their children are involved. Elena stepped into the room, her gun trained on Sophia. Let him go. Or what? You'll shoot me? Go ahead. These gentlemen have orders to kill both of you if anything happens to me. Then what happens to your son? Mommy? Micah's voice was small, broken. Mommy, I'm scared. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Elena kept the gun steady despite the tremor running through her entire body. Everything's going to be okay. Touching. Sophia's hand tightened on Micah's shoulder, making him flinch. 6 years of running, Elena. 6 years of Adrian tearing apart my family's reputation, starting wars, making enemies, all because you disappeared with his bastard. Don't, Adrian said quietly, his voice deadly. Don't call him that. Why not? It's what he is, the product of one night's indiscretion. A mistake that's cost us all dearly. Sophia moved around the chair, studying Micah like he was an interesting specimen. He looks like you, Adrian. Same eyes, same expression when he's trying not to show fear. What do you want? Elena asked. You want me? Fine. Let Micah go, let Adrian go, and you can have me. What I want, Sophia said, is to watch Adrian Vale lose something he can't replace. The way he made me lose face in front of every family from here to Moscow. The way he humiliated me. This is between us, Adrian said. Leave them out of it. They are the point of it. Sophia pulled a knife from somewhere, the blade catching the light. You chose them over power, over the alliance that would have made you untouchable. You burned everything for a woman who ran from you and a child you'd never met. She pressed the blade against Micah's throat, not hard enough to cut, but close enough to make him go absolutely still. So now you get to choose again, Sophia continued. Which one lives, Elena or your son? Pick one. The other dies. The room went silent except for Micah's rapid breathing. Adrian's face was completely blank. That's not a choice. It's the only choice you have. Then choose me. Elena's voice was steady. Let Micah live. He's innocent in all of this. No. Adrian turned to look at her, and there was something fierce in his expression. No, Elena. He's 6 years old, Adrian. He deserves a chance to... I said no. Adrian looked back at Sophia. You want to hurt me? You want revenge? Fine. Take it. But you don't touch them. That's not how this works. Then change how it works. Adrian's voice dropped, became the voice of the man who'd built an empire on calculated violence. You kill them, you get a few seconds of satisfaction, then you have nothing. No leverage, no power, just me, with nothing left to lose and every reason to burn your entire world down. Sophia's expression flickered. You're not in a position to threaten. I have resources you can't imagine. People loyal to me in places you've never thought to look. You kill my family, and I will dedicate every waking moment to destroying you, your operations, your people, your family. I will take everything you have, and I will make you watch. Adrian's voice was absolutely calm. Or you can be smart. Let them go. Walk away. And we call this even. Even? Sophia laughed. You think this can ever be even? I think you have two choices. Revenge or survival. Pick one. The knife pressed slightly harder against Micah's throat. Elena could see a thin line of red appearing. Sophia. Adrian's voice cracked just slightly. Please, he's 6 years old. He doesn't know anything about our world. He thinks monsters aren't real. Please don't take that from him. Something in the plea, raw and desperate, made Sophia pause. She looked at Adrian like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. You really love them, she said slowly. This isn't strategy. This is real. Yes. You'd give up everything for them. I already did. 6 years ago. Adrian's hands were shaking. I ended our engagement, started a war, lost people, all because I couldn't stomach the idea of building a life with you while they were out there somewhere. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. The knife stayed at Micah's throat, but she wasn't pressing anymore. I could have loved you, she said quietly. If you'd given me the chance, I could have been what you needed. I know, Adrian said, and I'm sorry, not for the choice I made, but for the way I made it. You deserved better than that. I deserved the truth. The truth is, I was in love with someone else, someone who didn't want the life I could offer, someone who ran from me rather than stay. Adrian glanced at Elena, and I still chose her. I'll always choose her. Sophia's jaw tightened. For a moment, Elena thought she was going to cut anyway, going to make Adrian watch his son bleed out just to prove a point. Then she lowered the knife. Get him out of here, she said quietly. Adrian didn't move. What? Get your son and go, before I change my mind. Elena was already moving, rushing to Micah's side. Her hands shook as she cut through the zip ties with the knife Sophia handed her. Micah fell into her arms, sobbing, his small body trembling. Mommy, mommy, mommy. I've got you, baby. I've got you. Elena held him tight, her own tears falling into his hair. You're safe now. Adrian approached slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement would shatter whatever reprieve they'd been granted. Sophia, don't. She turned away, facing the window. Don't thank me, don't apologize again, just go. This doesn't end the war between us. I know. Sophia's shoulders were rigid. But tonight, I'm choosing to be something other than what you made me. Tonight, I'm better than you expected. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Your family is going to have questions. Let me worry about my family. Elena was already heading for the door, Micah in her arms. He was too big to carry comfortably anymore, but she'd carry him to the ends of the earth, if that's what it took. Adrian followed, his gun drawn again, watching the 3 armed men who hadn't moved. They looked to Sophia for orders. Let them leave, she said without turning around. All of them. They descended the stairs quickly, Elena holding Micah, Adrian behind them covering their retreat. Through the loading dock, back into the night, moving fast toward where they'd left the car. Micah's arms were locked around Elena's neck, his face buried against her shoulder. Mommy, who was that man? The one who looked like me? Elena's step faltered. She looked back at Adrian, who'd gone very still. That's... Elena's throat closed. She'd rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in her mind, but never like this. Never in the aftermath of violence, with her son's tears still wet on her skin. Adrian moved closer, his expression unreadable. He looked at Micah, really looked at him, and Elena could see the moment it hit him. The reality of this small person he'd helped create. This boy with his eyes and her smile and a fear of monsters that was about to get so much worse. "I'm your father," Adrian said quietly. "My name is Adrian." Micah lifted his head, studying Adrian with those two serious eyes. "You're real?" "Yes." "Mommy said you were far away." "I was, but I'm here now." Adrian's voice cracked slightly. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there before. I'm sorry about what happened tonight. I'm sorry for all of it." Micah processed this with that careful consideration he brought to everything. "Are you going to stay?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena looked at Adrian and saw the same uncertainty she felt reflected back. "If your mother lets me," Adrian said carefully, "if she thinks it's safe." "Is it?" Micah asked Elena. "Is it safe?" Elena thought about Marcus, dead on a living room floor. About Mrs. Chen, who might be dead too. About the warehouse burning and Sophia's knife at her son's throat, and 6 years of running that had led right back to this moment. "I don't know, baby," she said honestly, "but we're going to find out together." They reached the car. Adrian drove, Elena in the back seat with Micah still clinging to her. They didn't speak, all of them processing what had just happened. 10 minutes from the industrial complex, Adrian's phone rang. He answered on speaker. "Boss?" A voice Elena didn't recognize. "We've got a problem." "Talk." "Sophia's people found Mrs. Chen. She's alive, but she's in bad shape. Took a beating before they grabbed the kid." Elena's eyes closed. "Where is she?" "Charleston Medical Center. Unconscious, but stable." "Get our people to her room," Adrian said. "Round-the-clock protection. Nobody gets near her without clearance." "Already done." Adrian hung up. Met Elena's eyes in the rear-view mirror. "She's alive," he said. "That's something." It was. But it wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough until this was over. Until the threat was ended and Micah could sleep without nightmares and Elena could stop looking over her shoulder. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere I can end this properly." "Your estate. You remember it?" Elena remembered. The compound outside the city where Adrian had hosted the charity gala 6 years ago. 30 acres surrounded by walls and guards and security systems that cost more than most houses. A fortress. A prison. A home, maybe. If they could figure out how to build one from the pieces of what they'd broken. Micah had fallen asleep against Elena's chest, exhausted by fear and tears. She held him carefully, watching the city lights blur past the window. Adrian was watching them in the mirror. "What he asked? About me staying." "I heard. What's your answer?" Elena looked down at Micah's sleeping face, at the boy who asked questions about his father and had nightmares about being chased, at the child she'd tried so hard to protect that she'd stolen 6 years of his life. "Ask me again when this is over," she said quietly. "When the threat is gone and we can think clearly. Ask me then. And if I can't end it, if the threat is always going to be there, then we figure out how to live with it, together." Elena met his eyes in the mirror. "I'm done running, Adrian. For better or worse, I'm done." Something in Adrian's expression shifted. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Or just exhaustion finally catching up. "Together," he repeated. "I can work with that." They drove into the night toward Adrian's estate and whatever came next. Elena held her son and watched the man she'd never stopped loving navigate roads he knew by heart. And for the first time in 6 years, she let herself imagine a future where running wasn't the answer, where staying might be. The estate looked exactly as Elena remembered it. Sprawling grounds behind iron gates, security checkpoints disguised as landscaping, the main house rising 3 stories with wings that stretched in both directions. It had been beautiful 6 years ago, in that cold, intimidating way that expensive things often were. Now, at 4 in the morning, with Micah asleep in her arms, it looked like what it was. A fortress designed to keep the world out, or keep people in. Adrian's security team materialized as soon as they pulled through the gates. 6 men in tactical gear, moving with the precision of soldiers. They surrounded the car, checked the perimeter, and one of them opened Elena's door with a nod that was almost respectful. "Ma'am, welcome back." Elena didn't recognize him, but apparently he knew who she was, or at least knew she mattered to Adrian. "He's exhausted," she said, shifting Micah's weight carefully. "Is there somewhere he can sleep?" "Second floor, east wing." The guard looked at Adrian, who'd come around the car. "Sir, Dimitri's waiting in your office. Says it's urgent." "It always is." Adrian reached for Micah, and Elena let him take their son. It was strange seeing Adrian hold a child. His hands were sure but careful, like he was handling something precious and breakable at the same time. "I'll get him settled. You should rest." "I'm not tired." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Elena's body felt like it had been through a war. Every muscle ached. Her hands had finally stopped shaking about 20 minutes ago, but she could still feel the ghost of that tremor. "Elena, I'm coming with you. Whatever Dimitri has to say, I need to hear it." Adrian studied her for a moment, then nodded. "East wing first. Then we deal with the rest." The house was exactly as Elena remembered inside too. Marble floors, high ceilings, art that probably cost more than small countries. But the second floor was different. This was the private section, and it had a warmth the public areas lacked. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, colors that weren't aggressively neutral. Adrian carried Micah into a bedroom that looked like it had been prepared for a child. Not recently, the furniture had that quality of careful selection that took time. A bed with a navy comforter, shelves with books appropriate for a 6-year-old, a desk with drawing supplies still in their packaging. Elena stopped in the doorway, her throat tight. "When did you do this?" 3 weeks ago, when I found you in Charleston." Adrian laid Micah down carefully, pulling off his shoes but leaving him in his pajamas. "I didn't know what he'd like, so I guessed. If it's wrong, we can change it." He'd prepared a room for the son he'd never met. Had spent time thinking about what a 6-year-old boy might want, might need. The realization hit Elena harder than she expected. "It's perfect," she managed. Micah stirred, his hand reaching out automatically. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand in hers. "Mommy?" His voice was thick with sleep. "I'm here, baby." "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe. You can sleep now." "Will you stay?" "Right here. I'm not going anywhere." Micah's eyes drifted closed again. Within seconds, his breathing had evened out into the deep rhythm of childhood sleep. Elena sat there holding his hand and felt 6 years of fear finally catch up with her. She'd almost lost him. In that office with Sophia's knife at his throat, she'd been seconds away from watching her son die. And no amount of running, no amount of careful planning would have stopped it. "Elena." Adrian's hand touched her shoulder gently. "He's safe. You can let go for a minute." Could she? Elena wasn't sure. Letting go meant trusting that the world wouldn't end the moment she stopped watching. Trusting that someone else could protect what mattered most. Trusting Adrian. She stood slowly, carefully extracting her hand from Micah's grip. Adrian guided her out of the room, leaving the door cracked open. They walked in silence down the hallway, through a section of the house Elena had never seen before, until they reached a heavy door with a keypad lock. Adrian's office was different from the one in Manhattan. Darker, more utilitarian. Banks of monitors showed feeds from dozens of security cameras. A desk covered in files and laptops. Maps on the walls marked with notations Elena couldn't decipher from this distance. Dimitri was waiting, a compact man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of stillness that suggested military training. He stood when they entered, his eyes flickering to Elena with brief curiosity before focusing on Adrian. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Just one?" Adrian moved behind his desk, fatigue showing in the way his shoulders slumped slightly. "That's better than usual. The Constantines are in chaos. Sophia's decision to let you walk out with the kid has them questioning her authority. Her uncle is calling for her removal. They're fragmenting." "Good. Fragmented enemies are manageable enemies. Except the Ukrainians are using the chaos to make moves. They hit 2 of our warehouses in Red Hook 3 hours ago, took the inventory, burned what they couldn't carry." Dimitri's jaw was tight. "We lost 5 people." Elena watched Adrian's face go absolutely flat. Names: Chen, Rodriguez, Thompson, Harris, and Kovac. Families? Chen and Rodriguez both have kids. Thompson's wife is pregnant. Harris and Kovac were single. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call. When someone answered, his voice was controlled but not cold. "Sarah, it's Adrian. I need you to set up the family fund transfers. Full benefits for Chen, Rodriguez, and Thompson's people. College funds for the kids. And I want personal calls made to all of them. Not by lawyers, by me." He paused, listening. "Tomorrow is fine. Tonight is better. Yes, I know what time it is. Just get it done." He hung up, looked at Dmitri. "What's our response position?" 3 options. 1, we hit them back immediately. Show we're not weak. 2, we consolidate, protect what we have, wait for them to overextend. 3, we reach out to the Constantins, offer to help them stabilize in exchange for a coordinated response against the Ukrainians. Opinion? Option 3 is smart long-term but risky short-term. Option 1 satisfies our people but might trigger a full war. Option 2 makes us look defensive. Dmitri shrugged. "Your call, boss." Adrian turned to one of the monitors, studying what looked like a map of shipping routes. Elena could see him thinking, calculating angles she couldn't even perceive. "We do all 3, he finally said. "Hit them tonight, hard and fast, at their drug distribution center in Greenpoint. Make it clear we're not backing down. Then we pull back to defensive positions and send word to Sophia's uncle that we're open to temporary cooperation. He gets to look strong by accepting our offer. We get breathing room to consolidate. That's playing it both ways. That's survival." Adrian looked at Elena. "We have a son to protect now. I'm not taking chances on pride." Dmitri followed Adrian's gaze, seeming to really see Elena for the first time. "So the rumors are true. You found her." "I found them. And Marcus died for it." The accusation hung in the air. Elena felt it like a physical blow. Marcus, who'd taken a bullet meant for Adrian, who died protecting her. "Marcus made his choice," Adrian said quietly. "And I'll honor it by making sure his death meant something. By ending this war so my family doesn't need to run anymore." "Your family?" Dimitri's expression was unreadable. 6 years, and suddenly we're changing everything for a woman and a kid you barely know." "Careful," Adrian said, and there was steel in his voice now. "That woman is why I'm still standing. That kid is my son. And if you have a problem with either of those facts, there's the door." Dmitri held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "No problem, boss. Just making sure you know what you're doing." "I never know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway." Adrian turned back to the monitors. "Get the team ready for Greenpoint. I want it done clean and done quiet. No civilian casualties. We take out their operation, not the neighborhood." "Understood." Dmitri left. Elena and Adrian stood in silence, the monitors flickering with their endless surveillance feeds. "You don't have to do this," Elena said quietly. "Don't have to change your whole operation because we're here." "Yes, I do." Adrian didn't look at her. "For 6 years I ran things one way. Took risks because the only life I was gambling with was my own. But that's over now. I have people depending on me to stay alive, to come home. Adrian, I need to ask you something." He turned to face her. "And I need you to be honest. Can you live with this? With what I do? What I am?" Elena had been asking herself the same question since the moment she'd seen Micah in that chair, since she'd realized that running hadn't protected him at all. "I don't know," she said. 6 years ago, I couldn't. I looked at your world and all I saw was violence and death and children growing up afraid. But tonight," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Tonight I saw Sophia let us go because you appealed to something human in her. I saw you prepare a room for a son you'd never met. I saw you stop in the middle of a crisis to make sure dead men's families were taken care of. That doesn't change what I do. No, but it changes what it means." Elena moved closer to him. "You asked if I can live with this. The real question is whether you can live with being different. Because if we stay, if Micah grows up here, you can't be the same man you were. You can't take the same risks. can't operate the same way. I know. Do you? Because the Adrian Vale I knew 6 years ago would already be out there leading the Greenpoint raid himself, making sure it got done right. The Adrian Vale from 6 years ago didn't have a son sleeping upstairs. Adrian's voice was rough. Didn't have someone he couldn't afford to leave behind. Elena reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers automatically, and she could feel the tremor in them. Adrian Vale, who faced down armed enemies without flinching, was shaking. I'm terrified, he admitted quietly. I've built an empire on calculated violence, and now I have to protect the two people who make every calculation meaningless. Because if something happens to either of you, none of this matters. The money, the power, the empire. It's all worthless. Then we rebuild it, Elena said. Together. We figure out what kind of life we can build that keeps Micah safe, but doesn't require you to become someone you're not. What if there's no version of that? What if the only way to keep you both safe is to walk away from everything? Would you, if that's what it took? Adrian looked at her and Elena saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. Yes. If the choice is my empire or my family, there's no choice. I'd burn it all down. The declaration should have scared her, should have reminded her of all the reasons she'd run 6 years ago. Instead, Elena felt something settle in her chest. Some question she'd been carrying finally answered. I love you, she said. I loved you 6 years ago, and I love you now. I ran because I was afraid, not because I stopped loving you. Adrian's hand came up to cup her face. I loved you then too. That's why I let you go. Why I didn't chase you harder, faster. I thought you'd be safer without me. We were just surviving without you. Not safer, not better, just existing. I don't want you to just exist anymore. Adrian's thumb traced her cheekbone. I want to build something real, something that lasts. Elena kissed him. Not the desperate, drowning kiss from 6 years ago, not the violence of that night at the plaza. This was different. This was a choice made with clear eyes and full knowledge of what it meant. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said quietly. Not for alliance or strategy or protection. Marry me because I love you and I want to spend whatever time I have left making up for the 6 years I missed. That's not a very romantic proposal. I'm a shipping magnate with blood on my hands and enemies at the gate. Romance isn't exactly my strong suit. Elena laughed despite everything. Ask me again when this is over, when the threat is ended and we can think past the next 24 hours. Ask me then and I'll say yes. Promise? I promise. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting back to business mode. Team's ready for Greenpoint. I should... Stay here, Elena said. Send Dimitri. You said it yourself. You're not the same man you were 6 years ago. Prove it. The request clearly cost him. Elena could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Every instinct he had was telling him to go, to lead, to make sure it got done right. But he stayed. Dimitri can handle it, he said, more to himself than to Elena. He's done this 100 times. And you trust him. With my life, with yours. Adrian pulled out his phone, typed a quick message. There. It's in his hands now. They sat together on the leather couch in his office, watching the monitors flicker. At some point, Elena's eyes started to close. She fought it, but exhaustion was a tide she couldn't hold back forever. Sleep, Adrian said quietly. I'll wake you if anything happens. You should sleep too. I will, soon. Elena knew he was lying, but she was too tired to argue. She let herself drift, her head on Adrian's shoulder, his arm around her, safe for the first time in 6 years. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't remember the office having, and to voices, one adult, one child. Elena sat up fast, disoriented. She was in a bedroom, not the office. Adrian's bedroom, based on the masculine furniture and the scent of his cologne on the pillows. The voices were coming from somewhere nearby. Elena followed them to a sitting room connected to the bedroom and stopped in the doorway. Adrian and Micah sat at a small table by the windows. Between them was a chessboard. Micah was frowning at the pieces with intense concentration, while Adrian watched him with an expression Elena had never seen on his face before. Pride. Wonder. Love. all mixed together in something so raw it made her chest ache. That piece is called a knight, Adrian was saying. It moves in an L shape. 2 squares in one direction, 1 square perpendicular. That's weird, Micah said. It is, but it makes the knight useful. It can jump over other pieces, go places they can't. Like a superhero. Adrian smiled. Exactly like a superhero. Micah moved the knight, then looked up at Adrian seriously. Are you really my dad? The question caught Adrian off guard. Elena could see him struggling with how to answer. Yes, he finally said. I'm really your dad. Mommy said you had important work, that you couldn't be with us. That's partially true. Your mom and I, we had some problems, adult problems, and we made choices that kept us apart for a long time. Was it my fault? No. Adrian's response was immediate and fierce. Nothing about this was your fault, Micah. Not 1 second of it. The only thing you did was exist, and that's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Micah considered this. Even though you didn't know me? Especially because I didn't know you. Every day for 6 years I wondered about you. What you looked like, what you sounded like, if you were happy, if you were safe. Adrian's voice was rough. And now you're here, and you're real, and you're so much better than anything I imagined. I imagined you too, Micah said quietly. I made up stories about where you were, what you were doing. Sometimes you were a spy. Sometimes you were an astronaut. Once you were a dragon hunter. Those all sound more interesting than what I actually do. What do you actually do? Adrian glanced toward the doorway, meeting Elena's eyes. She nodded slightly, trusting him to find the right words. I run a shipping company, Adrian said. We move cargo all over the world. But I make sure our family stays safe, and sometimes that means dealing with people who aren't very nice. Bad guys? Sometimes. Yeah. Like the lady last night? The one with the knife? Adrian's jaw tightened. Yes, like her. She was scary. I know. I'm sorry you had to see that. Sorry you had to be scared. Micah moved another chess piece, not looking up. Mommy says being scared is okay. That brave people get scared too, they just don't let it stop them. Your mom is a very smart woman. The smartest. Micah finally looked up. Is she going to marry you? The question made Adrian choke on nothing. That's something your mom and I need to figure out. I think you should marry her. Then we can all live together, like a real family. We are a real family, Micah, married or not. But it would be better married. Then you couldn't leave again. The simple logic of a 6-year-old. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Adrian reached across the table, taking Micah's small hand in his. I'm not leaving, not ever again. I promise you that. Whether your mom and I get married or not, whether we all live together or figure out something else, I'm in your life now. For good. You promise? I promise. Micah studied him with those too serious eyes. Then he nodded, apparently satisfied. Okay, can we finish the game now? Absolutely. Elena watched them play, neither of them noticing her in the doorway. Adrian was patient, explaining each move without talking down to Micah. And Micah was absorbing everything, his natural intelligence making connections that surprised even Adrian. They were good together, natural in a way that shouldn't have been possible given they'd just met. But they weren't strangers. Not really. They shared too much. The same careful way of watching people. The same intensity when focused on something. The same stubborn refusal to give up even when losing. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Chen is awake. Asking for you? The hospital was a 40-minute drive. Adrian insisted on coming, on bringing a full security detail. Micah stayed at the estate with 2 guards and strict instructions not to open the door for anyone. Mrs. Chen looked small in the hospital bed, her face bruised, one arm in a cast. But her eyes were alert when Elena entered the room. Oh, Elena. Her voice was hoarse. I'm so sorry. I tried to stop them, but there were too many, and they said they were police. And, shh, it's okay. Elena took her uninjured hand carefully. Micah is safe. That's all that matters. They hurt him? No, he's fine. Scared, but fine. Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. I should have fought harder. You did everything you could. They would have killed you if you'd fought more. Elena glanced back at Adrian, who stood by the door giving them space. Mrs. Chen, this is Adrian Vale, Micah's father. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. She studied Adrian with the same intense scrutiny she'd once used to evaluate potential babysitters for Micah. You're the reason she ran, Mrs. Chen said bluntly. Yes, ma'am. You going to give her reason to run again? No, ma'am. I'm going to give her every reason to stay. Mrs. Chen snorted. Pretty words, but I've been watching that boy for 6 years, watching Elena try to build a life while looking over her shoulder. You bring peace or you bring trouble? Both probably, but I'm working on shifting the balance. Work harder. Mrs. Chen squeezed Elena's hand. You deserve peace, girl. You and that beautiful boy. If this man can't give you that, you tell me. I know people. Elena laughed despite everything. I'll keep that in mind. They stayed for another 20 minutes until Mrs. Chen's pain medication kicked in and she started to drift. In the hallway, Adrian made more calls, arranging for round-the-clock private security and the best specialists money could buy. You don't have to do this, Elena said. She protected my son. There's nothing I wouldn't do for her. They returned to the estate to find Dmitri waiting with news. The Greenpoint raid had been successful. The Ukrainian operation was crippled, with minimal casualties on both sides. And Sophia's uncle had sent word that the Constantines were open to a temporary truce. Define temporary, Adrian said. 6 months. Long enough to deal with the Ukrainians together. After that, we renegotiate. Terms? They want access to our Atlantic shipping lanes, and they want Sophia removed from operational command. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Counteroffer. They get limited access to the shipping lanes for the duration of the truce, and Sophia stays in command, but with oversight from her uncle. She made a good call last night. I'm not rewarding that by throwing her to the wolves. They won't like it. They don't have to like it. They just have to accept it or walk away. Adrian looked at Elena. I'm done making decisions based on what other people want. From now on, I do what's right for my family. Dmitri left to deliver the counteroffer. Adrian pulled Elena into his office, closed the door. I need to tell you something, he said, about the next few months. Elena braced herself. Okay. If the Constantines accept the truce, we'll have breathing room, time to consolidate, strengthen our defenses, maybe even start transitioning some of the riskier operations to other people. Adrian took her hands. But it won't be easy. There will be threats, attempts to test us. And Micah will need to understand enough about our world to stay safe without being terrified of it. How do we do that? Carefully, honestly. We teach him that his father runs a complicated business, that some people don't like us, that we have guards and rules for good reasons. Adrian's jaw tightened. And we give him as much normal life as we can. School, friends, activities. We don't let fear make him a prisoner. You've been thinking about this. I haven't stopped thinking about it since I saw him in that chair. Adrian pulled her closer. I want to be his father, Elena. Really be his father. Not just the guy who provides security and writes checks. I want to know him. Want him to know me. He wants that too. He asked me this morning if we were going to get married. Adrian's expression shifted. What did you tell him? I told him it was complicated, that grown-ups needed time to figure things out. Is that what we need? Time? Elena thought about the past 24 hours, about watching Adrian with their son, seeing him choose to stay instead of lead the raid, hearing him promise Micah he'd never leave. No, she said. I don't think we need more time. I think we need to stop being afraid of what this could be and just let it be. So that's a yes to the proposal? That's a yes to figuring it out together, to building something real. Adrian kissed her, cutting off whatever else she was going to say. And Elena let herself fall into it, let herself believe that maybe, finally, they'd found their way back to each other. When they broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to mess this up, he said quietly. I'm going to make mistakes, be too protective, take too long to transition away from the dangerous parts of the business. Probably, and I'm going to second-guess everything. Wonder if I should run, pull back when things get hard. So we're both disasters. Complete disasters, Elena agreed. But we're disasters together, and we have a 6-year-old who needs us to figure it out. Then we'll figure it out. The wedding happened 3 months later in the garden of the estate. Small, private, just the people who mattered. Micah was the ring bearer, taking his job with the same serious intensity he brought to everything. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row, her arm healed, crying into a handkerchief. Dmitri stood as Adrian's best man, having apparently decided that his boss's new priorities weren't the end of the world. And Elena's assistant from Hendrick and Associates flew in to stand beside her, one of the few people from her Charleston life who knew the truth. The vows were simple. No grand promises, no dramatic declarations, just two people who'd lost 6 years agreeing not to lose anymore. I promise to stay, Adrian said, even when it's hard, even when I want to run toward danger instead of away from it. I promise to be the father Micah deserves and the partner you need. I promise to trust you, Elena said, to believe that staying can be just as brave as running, to build this life with you instead of in spite of you. They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands that wouldn't draw attention or get caught on things during emergencies. Practical, like everything else they'd built together. The kiss was witnessed by 30 people and felt like a promise all its own. At the reception, Micah attached himself to Adrian's side, asking questions about everything and dragging his father to see the cake, the flowers, the ice sculptures. Adrian went willingly, his hand in his son's, looking more at peace than Elena had ever seen him. "You did good," Mrs. Chen said, appearing at Elena's elbow. "That man, he loves you. Loves that boy." "I know. You happy?" Elena watched Adrian lift Micah onto his shoulders so he could see over the crowd. Watched her son laugh, carefree for maybe the first time in his life. Watched the man she'd loved for so long finally become the person she'd always known he could be. "Yeah," she said. "I'm happy." The truce with the Constantines held, the Ukrainians were pushed back, their operations crippled by the coordinated response. Adrian began the slow process of transitioning the riskier parts of his empire to people he trusted, keeping the legitimate shipping business and slowly, carefully building something cleaner. It wasn't perfect. There were still threats, still moments when guards had to be doubled and Micah had to stay home from school. There were still nights when Adrian came home with blood on his clothes and exhaustion in his eyes. But there were also soccer games and parent-teacher conferences, chess matches at the breakfast table and bedtime stories about dragons. Normal moments threaded through the abnormal. Micah thrived. He asked questions. Hard questions about what his father did and why people wanted to hurt them. Adrian answered honestly, age-appropriately, never lying but never terrifying. And Micah, with the resilience of childhood, adapted. He understood that his family was different, that they had security for reasons, that some information couldn't be shared at school. But he also understood that he was loved fiercely, protected absolutely, and wanted desperately. On Micah's 7th birthday, he asked for one thing, a little brother or sister. Elena and Adrian exchanged glances across the birthday cake. "That's a big request," Elena said carefully. "I know, but I've been thinking about it." Micah's expression was serious. "If something happens to you and Dad, I don't want to be alone. I want someone who's mine, someone who understands." The logic was heartbreaking and perfect. "We'll think about it," Adrian said. "That means yes, right?" Micah's face lit up. "That means we'll think about it very carefully and make a decision together." But Adrian was smiling. As a family. That night, after Micah was asleep and the guards were set and the house was quiet, Elena and Adrian lay in bed talking about the future. "Another child," Adrian said quietly, "in this world. With these threats. The threats are less now than they were, and they'll be less next year, and the year after that." Elena turned to face him. "You're building something different, Adrian, something that might actually last." "You really think so?" "I think you called off a war to protect a son you'd never met. I think you're turning down opportunities every day because they're too risky. I think you're becoming the man I always believed you could be." Adrian pulled her closer. "Then let's do it. Let's have another baby. Let's build this family the right way this time." "Together?" "Together." 2 years later, Elena stood in the garden where they'd been married, watching Adrian teach both of their children to play chess. Micah, now 9, was patient with his little sister Sophia, explaining the pieces with the same careful attention Adrian had once shown him. Sophia, at 2, was more interested in knocking over the pieces than learning the game. But she giggled when Micah pretended to be outraged, and Adrian caught the flying pawns with practiced ease. The empire had changed. Most of the violent operations were gone, sold off, or shut down. What remained was cleaner, still not entirely legal, but not the blood-stained business it had been. Adrian had enemies, but fewer, had threats, but manageable ones. And he had this, a family, a home, a life that was more than just survival. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen, who watched the kids 2 afternoons a week and treated them like her own grandchildren. Dinner at my place Sunday. No arguments. Elena smiled, typing back a confirmation. This was the life they'd built. Messy, complicated, sometimes dangerous, but real. Adrian looked up, meeting her eyes across the garden. He smiled, and Elena saw everything she'd ever wanted reflected back at her. Not perfection, not safety, not the absence of fear, but love. Partnership. A man who'd chosen his family over his empire and somehow managed to keep both. Elena walked over, sat down beside him, and watched their children play. Micah was explaining something complicated to Sophia, who ignored him completely in favor of stealing Adrian's captured pieces. She's going to be trouble, Adrian said, catching Sophia as she tried to make a break for it with a handful of chess pieces. She takes after her father. I was thinking she takes after her mother. The running away thing, Elena laughed. Nobody's running anymore. No, Adrian agreed, pulling her close with his free arm while Sophia wiggled in his lap. Nobody's running. And for the first time in 8 years, Elena believed it. Not because the threats were gone or the danger had passed, but because they'd finally learned how to face it together. The broken family was whole. The years of running were over. And the empire that had once separated them had become the fortress that protected their forever. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was theirs, and that was enough.